Hello everybody, welcome to the County Seat. I'm Chad Booth, your host. Today we're going to be talking about food, one of my favorite subjects. We're going to be talking about the paradigm between food safety and food freedom. Last year in the legislature, a Food Freedom Act was proposed and worked its way through the legislature. It didn't pass. It will probably come up again this year. To understand exactly what is in that bill, what it stands for, we decided we would give you a course on Food Freedom 101 with Cameron Porter.
HB 144, the Food Freedom Act. You may not know what it is, but if you buy or sell food at a farmer's market, you should learn about it. Well, luckily, that's what we're talking about today on the County Seat.
The Food Freedom Act was introduced in the last Utah legislative session. It did not pass, but the supporters of the bill are already working hard to get a version of the bill in the next legislative session. So what does the bill do? What problems does it try to solve, and does it solve them?
I think it introduces the ability to sell some products out of homes, off of farms to the public versus them selling at a retail store or other places like that. I guess you would say it kind of bypasses government compliance and regulation.
The way it was written was really broad spectrum. It pretty much just removed all regulations, and it was really vague. So it said anybody selling direct to consumer is exempt from all regulations.
Though the Food Freedom Act does make an effort to solve some problems, it is facing fierce opposition for some other problems that it would allegedly create.
The reality in our industry is that agriculture is endangered. It really is. We're losing numbers of farmers at an astronomical rate. And there needs to be some, if agriculture is valued, then there does need to be something in place. And I think the food freedom is kind of hinting at that.
I think the main problem is the safety issue involved. A lot of the farmers and producers are thinking that the folks that want to buy this food that they want to sell direct to already have the knowledge, working base, they come from farms, they come from rural communities that want to purchase. And a good example would be raw milk or just like a chicken that's produced on a farm. Well, I don't think what they really realize is the folks that do the drive-bys or happen to see a market like that or happen to hear about it and go buy a product that weren't raised that way, so they really don't know how to treat that product once they get it home or even transporting it to their house, nor do they realize what they need to do to it to ensure that it's safe to consume.
Essentially, the Food Freedom Act frees direct sale food producers from any kind of regulation, with the stipulation that the consumers are informed that the products they are purchasing are neither inspected nor regulated by the state. But will the Food Freedom Act really create more freedom without causing a health crisis? We'll find out when we join our guest panel. For the County Seat, I'm Cameron Porter.
Thanks, Cameron. When we come back, we will start putting together the recipe for a good balance between food safety and food freedom with our panel here on the County Seat.
149 million years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
The weekends just never feel like they're long enough. By the time you get to a destination, you're worn out and you may need a vacation to recover from your last vacation. The solution is closer than you think, and that's just what you need. You can find the desert at Little Sahara, the cool refreshment of Yuba Lake, escape to the green of the forest on the Nebo Loop. Make your escape to Juab County. It'll change your family forever. What do you picture when you hear Rich County, Utah? Bear Lake Adventure? snowmobile action, pristine skiing, spectacular solitude. Well, if that isn't what first came to mind, then you just don't know Rich County. The Bear Lake Monster Polar Plunge, snowmobiling Monte Cristo, ice fishing Bear Lake, skiing the backcountry, fishing at the Cisco Disco. Come and find out what you never knew you were missing. Rich County, Utah.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about food freedom and food safety. They can go hand in hand, but sometimes they seem to conflict with each other. Joining us for our conversation from the Department of Agriculture and Food, the Deputy Commissioner, Scott Erickson. We have Tyson Roberts from Roberts Family Farms in Layton, and a great produce provider for northern Utah. And Travis Waller, the Director of Regulatory Services, Department of Ag and Food. Guys, thanks for joining us today for this conversation. So, in the story we talked about food freedom and the fact that it's, you know, it's kind of a movement, not just a law that came up in the legislature. And it sounds really good. It sounds really appealing. But inherently, you know, is there a problem with it?
You know, the question, if anyone is asked, should you be able to go and buy food from a farmer, almost everybody's going to say yes. And we agree with that concept. We, you know, Envision Utah just did a survey, and more than 60% of people in the state want to have more local food available to them. And so we support the concepts of local food being available, but the challenges are the other aspects that come with it. There are some inherently dangerous and potentially hazardous foods that come with it that concern us. You know, all of us know that you can't leave chicken out on the counter in your kitchen. And if it's out for too long, it inherently has some health risks. And whether it's chicken or raw milk or other potentially hazardous food, it could potentially cause a problem.
So, I mean, that's a pretty obvious given. Do you see anything different with this? I mean, you know, you take a bucket of strawberries from your farm, you put it out on a counter at a farmer's market, and, you know, pretty much somebody goes home and rinses it. They're not going to have a problem with it, right?
Well, yeah, you know, most of the products that I produce, you know, fruits and vegetables, you know, there's little risk to them. So that, you know, they're not a high risk product that when I take from the farm to the farmer's market or I sell to a consumer anywhere, there's not a lot of risk for, you know, foodborne illnesses or different problems. You know, until it's cut, you know, processed, it's really not changed, and, you know, there's not a lot of risk. But, you know, I'm a farmer, so I worry about my products being safe, but I'm also a consumer. You know, I have kids to feed, and I'm buying products, so I want them to be safe as well. You know, so I look at it as a producer, but also, you know, as a buyer.
Do you guys feel that this was the Food Freedom Act that came up in the last legislature was too broad? Is that the problem?
Yeah, the way the legislation was drafted, it's just too wide open for anything to happen. There were no measures to protect the consumer whatsoever. All the burden fell on the consumer. As Tyson alluded to, you know, we're concerned about potentially hazardous foods, raw poultry, raw meat, raw milk, foods that have been processed, fruits and vegetables that have been cut or cooked or had other processes occur to them. Those are considered potentially hazardous, and those are foods that need some types of control in place to make sure that they're safe.
So, do you feel that the current direction or the current regulation you have in place, you know, in Portlandia, this TV series, they've got these people that are you know, wanting to connect with the food they eat, so they go to order chicken at a restaurant, and then they end up going to the farm, and they end up joining the commune. And it's a hilarious skit about people being connected to the food, but on the other hand, they create a potentially you know, potentially dangerous thing because they don't know anything about food, and then they're in it. Is that part of the problem that you have? Is that people, if there's total freedom, people may not be educated on how to process the foods? That's correct.
You know, there are a lot of competent people out there that are able to handle food correctly, and they know what they're doing, but there are fears there are some people that may not fully understand the potential hazards associated with certain types of foods, and they're not required to. Under the way the Food Freedom Act was written, they're not required to learn about those types of potential hazards.
Yeah, okay, great. Well, we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come right back to the county seat, and we're going to talk about what's already in place and get a perspective from a farmer about how he feels about the regulatory environment in which he operates. We'll be right back with the county seat.
There is a place where looking out means looking in, where an impression lasting only a few seconds will be imprinted on a life forever, where courage is forged and innocence rediscovered, where remembering is rewarding and forgetting unforgettable. There is a place where truth is felt and where seeing is believing. There is a place.
Beautiful scene, isn't it? The great wide spaces of the wild, wild West. Hi, I'm Chad Booth, host of At Your Leisure. I'm asking you to support the Blue Ribbon Coalition. Their efforts responsibly preserve access to our public lands. If it were not for the Blue Ribbon Coalition and their efforts, you may not have access to millions of acres of land across the West. This is America's playground, and if we don't do anything, we are going to lose it. Join, participate, and donate.
Have you ever wanted to recreate the world around you? Add some excitement, culture, adventure? Well, there's no need to remake the world when that perfect combination already exists. Just remember 4 words. Welcome to Weber County. In Ogden, you'll find everything you're looking for, from the top of Powder Mountain to the restaurants of our revitalized downtown. Ogden, Utah. Mountain to metro and everything in between. Visit Ogden.com.
ATV? Check. 4-wheel driving? Check. Bouldering? Check. Mountain biking? Check. Hiking? Check. River rafting? Check. Adventure is about more than just crossing activities off of a list, but hey, if you can find a place that gives you everything you're looking for, all the better. In Emery County, you'll find the San Rafael swell, trails, lakes, and the small-town hospitality you're looking for. San Rafael Country, in the heart of Utah. Visit us and check something off your list.
Welcome back to the county seat. We are talking today about the relationship between the farm and the consumer and how it's becoming more direct than it's been in the past. And I'd like to direct this to you, Travis. There's been this kind of image created that the Department of Ag and Food is draconian, and that they don't allow this, that they're a hindrance to this fair trade between consumers and the farm. But is that really the case?
That's not the case. I think people are maybe misinformed or not informed. Currently, we have a pretty favorable marketplace, and the regulations that we have encourage people to engage in the food industry as much as possible.
I did hear somewhere that somebody had indicated, I believe from your department, that some of the things that they actually were proposing or were in the legislation actually were already in place in the regulations within the department.
Yeah, that's correct. Like raw fruits and vegetables, people are free to sell those wherever they want. They can sell them from their front yard if they want to. They can sell them to grocery stores. There are no regulations whatsoever on that, except for the fact that if you store them up off the ground.
Yeah, and there's, that's how my family's been for a long time. Back in the 60s, before I was even thought of, my family started selling fruits and vegetables to consumers, on roadside stands and in a couple different counties in Magna, in Bountiful. And, our products have always been available. There's regulations, like Travis said, when we do sell at a farmer's market, you keep it off the ground. There's different things, but they're basic things that help us to keep our products safe. But in the same run, there's some of the higher risk products that are available now. Raw milk. I have a friend up in Midway that, he's able to sell his raw milk now, in his store on his farm. So, there's different avenues that a producer can go through to get those products available to consumers.
So is it the thought of the department that they're not trying to actually regulate or create a barrier to entrance into the trade, but they're just trying to protect the consumer at the end of that business relationship?
Yeah, part of it is the consumer and part of it is the companies. We have a company now that started off doing some chocolates and fudge, and they went all the way through the process and decided they wanted to go to a grocery store. Well, they didn't have their labeling properly completed. They didn't have their ingredient list, and so they had to start over with all of their marketing and everything else because they had to change much of what they had done. We'd rather companies not have to go through that so that they can be successful from the beginning, and that's where Travis's shop comes in, to try to help people be successful from the beginning and to help consumers feel confident with the food that they're getting. That it's one thing to know your farmer, and that's great. We encourage everybody to go to a farm, pick up fruit and vegetables from a roadside stand, from Tyson and from others in the state. But the fact of the matter is, most people in the state won't have that opportunity. And as much as we'd like to increase it, that opportunity for those that have it needs to happen, needs to be more available. But for those that don't, we need to make sure it's safe and make sure it's available when we've got large production and large quantities of food moving through the food system.
So, short of the act that didn't pass, is there some attempt to try and adjust to this demand for this closer relationship to the farm?
Sure, we've worked pretty closely with the Farm Bureau and the Retail Food Association and a few legislators to talk about some legislation in the next session that would be able to reduce some of the cottage food regulations on foods that aren't potentially hazardous, that wouldn't have as much danger to consumers as, say, raw milk or chicken or some of these others would. And language hasn't been drafted yet, but we're moving down that path. We've been noticed by other states as one of the most cottage food friendly states in the country, but we want to relax some of those regulations even more to make it simpler for people to get into the marketplace and make that possible.
You just don't want a big outbreak, like
Sure.
a TV series like The Last Milk Truck or something like that. Yeah, okay, well that all makes sense. What are some of the things that you have? I mean, you don't feel necessarily as a farmer that you are oppressed by Department of Ag and Food in your relationship.
No, I don't. I see the department as, a guardian of the food supply. So, whether it's my products or others. I've looked into other ventures. It'd be nice to be able to sell, my potatoes is French fries. I'd sure make a lot more off of a potato. And I see the regulations that I would have to go through, and I don't see them as hurdles. I see them as safeguards, really, because it protects me. But also, in the end run, I think the goal of the Department of Agriculture is to protect the consumer. So I see those steps that I would have to take as, safeguards, as something to keep it healthy.
As a responsible producer, do you see some benefit in your reputation and the reputation across the board generally in the fact that they're setting some high standards for food safety? If there was an outbreak of botulism or salmonella or some other thing that could be carried off of fruits and vegetables or whatever, and there was a scare across the farmers' markets, would that have an impact on you?
Well, you talked about reputation. Reputation's important, as a farmer, especially as one in my stand. I go out and I go to farmers markets and I meet the consumers. So, my relationship with them is vital to me because they trust me. And, the regulations that we see, in the most part, we go above and beyond those regulations. We want to produce a safe product. We don't want an outbreak,
Well, Scott, you alluded to something earlier about saying, the guy that was producing the candies had to go back and start to square one. Tyson, my question for you is, what kind of tools are in place? I've got 6 goats sitting at my place, and I decide that goat milk is a good thing, and I want to start selling it, and I've got a strawberry patch. how would you help me if I'm just approaching this and I would see it as help and not being pushed out of the marketplace before I started?
Well, we do have several programs in place, including a dairy program. We have a raw dairy program. We have a pasteurized milk program as well. So depending on what your desires would be, what your needs would be, we would go from there. But let's just say you want to make goat yogurt with your strawberries, and you want to pasteurize it, hopefully. We would help you jump through the hoops or whatnot to make sure that you're doing things accordingly to make sure your product's safe, wholesome, and honestly presented.
So is this a hurdle that actually can keep people out? Can a small guy get himself from point A to point B where he can actually start making money off of his produce? I might throw that your direction, Scott.
You know, Travis would know the number better than I do, but we have hundreds, if not thousands, of cottage food producers that are, most of them aren't doing this full time, but they are in business making food out of kitchens and making money off of it. And we'd love to see that grow. Many of them have gone from part-time to now they're in commercial kitchens, and this is their business that they're feeding their families with. And that's what we want to see in Utah agriculture.
Not just the meals they're cooking, but they're actually making enough money to feed their families.
They're feeding their family, not with the meals, but with the food that's coming in. But that's what we would like to see with Utah agriculture, is for people not just to be able to feed themselves, but to be able to spread that out and make more local food available to residents throughout the state.
Excellent. This has been a great conversation. We're going to take one last commercial break. We'll come back with our final thoughts here on the County Seat. Stay with us.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
Kanab, base camp for your southern Utah adventures. You belong in Kanab.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
Unlimited opportunity for adventure. It's all about knowing where to look. ATV adventures, rock crawling events, art festivals, and wildlife events. The opportunities are limitless. Pick your adventure in Millard County.
Welcome back to the County Seat. We are talking today about farm to consumer, that direct relationship, and some of the challenges. Talked a little bit about food freedom. We have a story, Tyson, that I think illustrates the point about food freedom.
Well, yeah, talking about farm relationships with farmers, that's my business is pivotal on that. My relationship with consumers and with the people that buy my food. I sell at a farmer's market in Evanston, Wyoming, where last year similar legislation to this Food Freedom Act passed. And you know, one thing that I saw that really disturbed me was raw milk being sold at the farmer's market. You know, people carrying it around. You know, keep in mind it's 80, 85 degrees. You know, it's not a good situation for raw milk. You know, containers that leak, setting them on my tables and buying my products. There's just a lot of risk for me in cross-contaminating and putting my consumers at risk. So it's a scary scary thing that some people might not look at.
Some of the other aspects that we're concerned with is labeling of products. Some products might have allergens or be allergenic, and if that's not properly disclosed to the consumer, that could be pretty serious for an individual who is sensitive to certain types of foods. Other aspects of the bill that did not sit well with us was the lack of traceability.
How big of a problem could that be?
Well, here in Utah, we do have some raw milk producers, but because of the systems we have in place, if and when there are problems with raw milk, we are able to identify them quickly and put a stop sale to those products until the farmer is able to get the problem worked out.
Does that apply to vegetables too? Can that potentially have a bad situation?
Potentially. It could potentially be detrimental to a commodity group.
And we had a situation that Travis's inspectors found the strain of salmonella in cucumbers last year from a farm in Mexico, and because they were able to identify what farm they came from, we were able to pull that product off of the shelf in grocery stores around the western United States to prevent other people from getting sick. And that's one of the advantages of having this traceability, is not just preventing one person from getting sick. That will happen. As much as we don't want it to, people are going to get sick from food at some point. But preventing that from being an outbreak and from impacting dozens and hundreds and thousands of people, that's what we want to do, is prevent that from happening.
I would almost imagine that without that kind of traceability, you had an outbreak, you'd basically eliminate cucumbers from the entire Utah market instead of just the ones that were infected. Would that potentially be what you'd have to do?
Potentially, and one of the issues is if there's a cucumber outbreak, or milk's a better example, if there's a problem with milk, it's not just the raw milk or milk from this area of the state that sees a drop in sales, it's milk in general. Or if it's produce in general. And so it doesn't just impact Tyson if it's coming from Tyson's farm, it impacts everybody else.
And also if one farmer's market is affected, then it could affect my farmer's market, you know, in a neighboring city. You know, there might be people that are worried about shopping at a farmer's market if there was an outbreak.
As you guys said in the beginning, this is all stuff that people don't think about when they think about it. Gentlemen, thank you for helping us clear the air on this, and we're looking forward to seeing a bill in the next session of the legislature. Thank you for inviting us into your homes for the county seat. This is brought to you by Utah's county, some of the state agencies, in an effort to help you keep informed about local government and how it affects your life. Remember, it is where your life happens. Be involved, be part of the solution. We'll see you next week on the county seat.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled commercials for some breaking news. This just in. At Your Leisure, the West's #1 outdoor adventure show is awesome.
At the risk of editorializing, you need to watch At Your Leisure, Saturday nights at 10:30, Sunday mornings at 9, right here on ABC4.
If you'd like to share this video with your friends, well, you do that right here. If you would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you do that over here. If you'd like to interact with us on the county seat, that happens over here. If you want to watch the next episode of the county seat, you can catch it Saturday night at 11 or Sunday morning at 8:30 on ABC4, Good for Utah.